Greetings, fellow lords and ladies. We're looking at Game of Thrones Season 4, now continues on with the episode, The Laws of Gods and Men. Beginning at the Dreadfort, Yara Greyjoy prepares her troops for the assault on the Dreadfort to rescue her brother Theon. She reads a letter sent by Ramsay Snow, threatening to flay all Ironborn who do not leave the north. While Ramsay takes Miranda's virginity and engaging in rather violent sex, Yara and troops land and scale the walls of the castle. They quietly take out the guards as they search for Theon. Interrogating a guard, Yara learns of Theon's location, which is the dog kennels, and Yara then kills the guard, despite promising not to. There, the Ironborn and Yara see Theon sitting in a cage. Yara opens the cage, but Theon refuses to go with her, believing it's a cruel trick played by Ramsay. Ramsay and several Bolton troops enter and a fight ensues, with several Bolton and Greyjoy soldiers killed. Theon tells Yara his name has always been Reek, bites her, and cowers in his cage. Ramsay releases the hounds and Yara's forced to retreat to her ship. When one of the Iron Men asks about Theon, Yara says Theon is dead. Aww. Ramsay allows Reek to take a bath as a reward of his loyalty. Reek fears the bath is another trick, but Ramsay assures him it is not. While Reek bathes, Ramsay now plans to assault Mo Kalen and needs Reek to pretend to be someone he isn't, Theon Greyjoy. Ugh. Meanwhile, in Braavos, Stannis and Davos visit the Iron Bank of Braavos in hopes of securing funds to aid Stannis' war effort. At first, Tycho Nestoris, a representative from the bank, rejects the request, but Davos intrudes and points out that the funding Stannis is the best way they could possibly get the gold they loaned to Tywin Lannister back. The bank agrees to lend them gold, and Davos uses it to once again recruit his old pirate friend, Salladhor Saan, to Stannis' cause. Anyway, in Meereen, on one sunny day outside of Meereen, a goatherd and his son are peacefully tending the goats on a hill while the sun throws rocks to pass the time. Suddenly Drogon, now the size of a horse, appears and burns the field and kills a flock of goats while taking one with him. The goatherder travels to Meereen to visit the queen and lays the charred remains of his flock before Daenerys, hoping to not anger the queen and believes it to be punishment. Daenerys apologizes about Drogon's actions and promises to pay back 3 times the value of his flock. After he departs, Histar Zolorak presents his petition, the right to bury his father's remains in the Temple of the Graces, as he was one of the Meereenese Grey Masters crucified on Daenerys' orders. She counters that he was one of the masters that crucified the 163 children. The Rock reveals that his father actually spoke out against the crucifixion of slave children, but was overruled, but later was killed due to Daenerys' judgment anyway. Somewhat mollified, Daenerys allows him to bury his father. As he leaves, Daenerys asks how many more supplicants are waiting. Missandei answers that there are over 200 more. Whoa. Anyway, finally, in King's Landing, at a meeting of the small council, Tywin informs the councillors that Tyrion's trial will begin that afternoon. Lord Varys informs Tywin that the Hound has been spotted in the Riverlands, and Tywin orders a bounty on his head. Varys also informs the council of Daenerys' conquest of Meereen, and Tywin decides to take measures to prevent her from launching an invasion. In the dungeon, Jaime has Tyrion shackled and brought into the throne room to begin his trial. King Tom recuses himself from the trial, appointing his grandfather Tywin, Prince Oberyn Martell, and Lord Mace Tyrell as judges. Several witnesses are called for the prosecution, including Sir Meryn Trant, Grand Maester Pycelle, Queen Regent Cersei, and Varys, all of whom give testimony backing the accusations against Tyrion. At recess, Jaime asks Tywin to spare Tyrion, offering to break the oath to the Kingsguard and return to Castle Rock to be his heir. Tywin accepts, telling Jaime that Tyrion will be allowed to join the Night's Watch after being found guilty of Joffrey's murder, provided he pleads for mercy. Before the recess ends, Jaime speaks to Tyrion and urges him to do so. Tyrion is deeply distrustful of the offer, remarking that Eddard Stark was promised the same thing and yet still lost his head. But Jaime pleads with his brother to trust him, insisting that their father will keep his word, and advises him to keep her mouth shut, no more outbursts. Returning to trial, Tywin orders the next witness to testify, Shae. Her appearance astounds Tyrion and Jaime. She testifies that Tyrion and Sansa planned Joffrey's murder together, claiming that Sansa wanted vengeance from the murder of her father, mother, and brother. She tells the judge of Tyrion's sexual desires, embarrassing him in front of the crowd. Before she can continue, Tyrion, enraged beyond sense, angrily demands that he be allowed to confess his crimes. He angrily roars about how he saved King's Landing from Stannis Baratheon's forces, and says he should have let Stannis kill everyone at King's Landing, much to the horror and disgust of the people in the court. Tyrion then claims to be guilty. Tywin assumes that he is guilty for murdering King Joffrey Baratheon. Tyrion denies this, saying he is guilty of a far more monstrous crime. I'm guilty of being a dwarf. Tywin scoffs at Tyrion's claims and says he is not on trial for being a dwarf. Tyrion angrily says he has been on trial for his entire life as a dwarf. Tywin asks if he has nothing to say in his defense. Tyrion then says he has nothing to say in his defense, but only this. He then reveals his true feelings about Joffrey, denying guilt of the king's murder, but saying he wished to have killed Joffrey himself. Tyrion then turns his full fury towards Cersei and says that watching her vicious bastard of a son die gave him more relief than 1,000 lying whores. He then turns around to the court and roars that he wishes to have become the monster they thought he was, and would gladly give his life to watch everyone die from drinking poison. This enrages everyone in the court, and Tywin orders Sir Meryn trying to escort Tyrion back to the dungeons. Before he can be escorted out, Tyrion vows that he will not lose his life for a crime he did not commit, and, knowing he will get no justice from the court, demands a trial by combat. Bum bum bum. So now let's take a look at some notes surrounding this episode. The soundtrack playing for the credits is a rendition of the House Lannister theme. It did not appear in the official soundtrack release. This is the first time that the opening features 2 locations in Essos, Braavos and Meereen. Tyrion's Truck contains multiple callbacks to previous episodes. As the producers noted in the behind-the-scenes featurettes, most of these are things Tyrion actually said, but presented out of context to put him in a disparaging light. Sir Meryn describes how Tyrion chastised and struck Joffrey when he caused the raid of King's Landing in Season 2's The Old Gods and the New. As also Tyrion threatened Meryn and compared Joffrey to the Mad King in Season 2's Garden of Bones. And as Tyrion points out, Joffrey was throwing Sansa with a loaded crossbow at the time, then had Sir Meryn strip and beat the helpless girl in full view in front of the court. Pycelle recalls that Tyrion had him in prison in Season 2 so let his demi never die, which he did because he discovered that Pycelle was spying on him for Cersei. Cersei recalls that Tyrion threatened to one day turn Joy to ashes in Season 2's The Prince of Winterfell, which was actually a faint threat, because Cersei had mistakenly captured Ross when thinking she was his lover, Shae, thinking he was his real lover, Shae, and he wanted to trick her into thinking he was deeply upset because she had actually caught the right woman. Varys recounts that in Season 3's Mysha, during a small council meeting, Tyrion threatened that Joffrey should speak to him more carefully because right now kings are dying like flies. The quote is accurate, though he doesn't mention that Tyrion said after Joffrey gleefully insisted that he wanted Robb Stark's severed head served to Sansa, Tyrion's nominal wife, at his own wedding feast, which disgusted the entire council, including Varys and Tywin. As the producers point out in the behind-the-scenes featurettes, Tyrion doesn't seem as deeply upset by Varys' testimony against him, intellectually at least, because repeatedly in the past, Varys played warned Tyrion that if his father ever turned on him, he would not risk openly intervening on his behalf. She recalls how Tyrion had brought an inquirer for her services in Lannister camp at Season 1's Baelor, and how he asked to fuck her like how he asked her to fuck him like it was the last night in the world before the battle in the morning. When Cersei testifies, she also recalls Tyrion and Joffrey's interaction during the Battle of Blackwater. Unlike the other witnesses, such as Sir Meryn and Pycelle, she doesn't just twist idle threats Tyrion made at Joffrey, flat out lies about what happened. She says that Tyrion tried to put Joffrey in harm's way by putting him in the front lines, though when the attack came, Joffrey bravely insisted on staying at the battlements to inspire the troops. In reality, when the siege started looking dire, it was Cersei herself who commanded Joffrey be brought hide in the right keep with her, and the cowardly Joffrey readily abandoned his troops, leaving Tyrion to have to rally them in a counterattack. Cersei might not actually be lying in a traditional sense. In the books, her obsession with Joffrey is so great that she actually believes her own distorted views about him, even when they contradict actual events. For that matter, she does as much as she herself called Joffrey back from the battlements. From her inner thought monologue in her own POV chapters, Cersei will generally remember her own past failures differently so she can blame someone else, rather than admit fault even to herself. Tyrion states, "I saved you. I saved the city and all your worthless lives." According to the novels, he has indeed contributed a lot to the victory over Stannis, way more than others who contributed to the outcome of the battle. It was his idea to form an alliance with the Tyrells, although Littlefinger accomplished that. The chain omitted from the show was his idea. He supervised the training of the Spitfire crews and Wildfire. He sent the hill tribes to harass Stannis' flanks and kill his scouts as they passed through the Kingswood. Lastly, after Jocelyn Byward was killed and the Hound deserted, it was Tyrion who took command over the Kingslanders and led them against Stannis' troops. Due to his outstanding bravery, the invading host was delayed long enough until Tywin and the Tyrells' reinforcements arrived. This is the first episode in which absolutely none of the Starks appear, nor of the intermediate supporters, i.e. the Tullys, such as Callum's brother Edmure and Uncle Brynden, or loyal vassals such as the Umbers, or even Brienne of Tarth. Even Eddard's bastard son, Jon Snow, does not appear in this episode. In Season 1, Eddard was in every episode except the last, but Catelyn and his children did appear in the finale. Afterwards, one of Eddard's children would appear at least once in every episode, rotating between Robb, Sansa, Arya, and Bran, who was often accompanied by Rickon. Arya appeared in every episode of Season 2 except Blackwater, which was focused entirely on events at King's Landing, but at least Sansa appeared in that episode. In Season 3, Arya appeared in every episode except the first, but Robb, Catelyn, and Sansa did appear in the premiere. Even if Jon Snow was disregarded, this point would still stand. Of Eddard's 5 lawful children, at least one of them appeared in every episode from Season 2 onwards. In fact, the only episode up to this point in which none of Eddard's 5 lawful children appeared was in Season 1, Episode 7, You Win or You Die, which Jon Snow did appear in. The episode still focused on Eddard Stark himself, and his failed attempt to stop Cersei from croning Joffrey as king. It was only one of 3 episodes to date that even Tyrion didn't appear in. Additionally, none of the Night's Watch characters or storylines appear in this episode, as there have been a few episodes that Jon didn't appear in, but Samwell Tarly did. Marjorie and Loras Tyrell appear in this episode, but have no speaking lines. In an interview with the Game of Thrones podcast a few days after the episode aired, writer Brian Cogman answered several questions. The unprecedented absence of any Starks, or Jon Snow in the Night's Watch, was not a conscious choice, as the production team made a deliberate decision to alter the familiar story formula. Short scenes often get shuffled around between episodes, so if no Starks were written for a specific episode, sometimes a women's scene with Arya would be inserted from a separate episode in editing, just to check in on a Stark subplot. In this episode, however, the Lannister plotline simply took up so much screen time that not even a single brief scene with one of the Starks fit into it. Even Cogman didn't realize there were no Starks in the episode until they had finished shooting. Many reviewers found it bizarre and unexpected that after all the build-up given in the Season 3 finale that Yorick Greyjoy would attempt to rescue Theon from the Dreadfort, her small rating for us actually fails, and in about 3 minutes of screen time the subplot unravels. Cogman explained that this was actually what the writers intended. The W wanted the entire Yara attempts to rescue Theon subplot to briefly end in failure, as a fake-out to the audience to surprise them. Similarly to how Raylan Baratheon was built up in Season 2, but then was unexpectedly assassinated by a shadow, or her Robb Stark seemed to be built up as the faction leader who would ultimately defeat the Lannisters, only to be killed at the Red Wedding. As Cogman intended it, Yara has never failed before, and this is very embarrassing for her. It's a case of reality setting in, that she thought it would be a grand damn the odds epic rescue, but it is really impossible for only 50 Ironborn to successfully raid a strong castle like the Dreadfort. On a certain level, Cogman thinks that Ramsay let Yara escape, after most of her men have been killed by the Bolton garrison as hunting dogs, to send a message that the Ironborn shouldn't screw with him anymore. Ramsay is a sadist and knows that letting Yara leave alive actually torments her more than killing her, because the Ironborn never retreat. Think retreat is shameful, and would actually prefer to gloriously die fighting. In the Season 4 Blu-ray commentary, Cogman stressed that Yara isn't afraid of Ramsay's hunting dogs. She had been hoping for the element of surprise with a small raiding force, but now she's clearly lost the element of surprise. The council garrison is responding to her presence, and the odds are mounting against her. Ultimately, Cogman says, she leaves because she knows that if she dies, her father's bloodline will be extinguished, so she can't lightly risk her own life. Originally, the first scene of the episode was the one in which the dragon roasts the goats, which was impressive, but later it was decided that the finished established shot of Braavos was great for grabbing everyone's attention in the beginning. Historical Lucra's scene with Daenerys is entirely an invention of the TV series, as so much at all of Hizdahr's father is made in the books. Hizdahr begs Daenerys to let him give his father a proper funeral despite what crimes she feels he was complicit in. Cogman openly admits that he took this from the ancient Greek tragedy Antigone, which was written around the year 441 BC by Sophocles. Cogman originally scripted the scene in which Tywin and Jaime meet during the trial's recess to take place in Tywin's office in the Tower of the Hand. Charles Dance, however, pointed out that this might be a bit repetitious given all the other scenes that took place in Tywin's office, and also suggested the scene was moved to the Garden of Atrium set. Cogman also thinks it worked better that way, because having Tywin discuss the trial while he is eating lunch at the atrium makes him seem much more flippant and uncaring about Tyrion's fate. Cogman pointed out that Cersei, not Tywin, was the one coaching the witnesses. It is a show trial, but Tywin is dignified enough that he feels it would be seen as a breach of decorum if he directly spoke to the witnesses. Similar to how in this episode, immediately preceding this one, he wouldn't even discuss the trial in private with Cersei. Of course, Cogman noted, Tywin was known up to a point that Cersei was manipulating the witnesses, but wasn't very concerned and did nothing to stop it. He just didn't want it to be seen as personally rigging the trial. There was quite a lot of confusion and debate amongst viewers about exactly how Shae came back to the Red Keep, given that when she was last seen, Bronn had just put on her ship in the harbor bound for Pentos. Some viewers developed elaborate explanations of how Shae was reacquired, so it's alright sending a ship all the way to Pentos to retrieve her. Cogman pointed that Tywin's first line after Joffrey was poisoned was stop all the ships in the port. Cogman felt the obvious implication was the Lannister soldiers had quite simply managed to stop Shae's ship before I left the bay. Cogman was confused why some viewers put so much thought into this or found it difficult to understand. Regarding the Iron Bank of Braavos, Cogman was worried and wanted to make one thing absolutely explicit. The Iron Bank did not officially decide to ban the Lannisters in favor of fully funding Stannis in this episode. Instead, Davos raised enough down their minds about how well the Lancers could maintain their hold on power and manage their debts after Tywin died that the bank extended. After Tywin died that the bank decided to extend Stannis a provisional loan to at least string him along. The loan was just enough to buy new food, supplies, and horses for his remaining men, said to be under 4,000, and to repair Salladhor Sand's sail fleet so he could transport these remaining soldiers where he needed to, instead of remaining mobilized on Dragonstone. It didn't give Stannis enough money to hire massive new mercenary armies, such as the Golden Company, which Davos previously mentioned. Cogman stressed that as of this episode, the bank decided that it would be a bad idea to put all of its eggs in one basket, and it wants to at least keep its options open between Tywin and Stannis, while still remaining officially neutral. For the time being, though, the bank still acknowledges that Tommen is the King of the Iron Throne itself, controlling the capital city, thus allegedly also responsible for the Iron Throne's massive foreign debts. The Free City of Braavos makes its first on-screen appearance in this episode, though it has often been mentioned since Season 1. This makes it the second of the Free Cities to actually be shown on screen, following the introduction of the Targaryens and Pentos at the beginning of Season 1. As Brian Cogman explained, in the books, Tycho Nestoris comes to Westeros as a representative of the Iron Bank, but the writers felt it would be more interesting to physically introduce Braavos and the Bank, as well as to take Stannis out of his comfort zone. Quote, when we first broached the subject of bringing the Iron Bank, for a while the version was Iron Bank representative Tycho Nestoris would come to Dragonstone to meet on Stannis' turf. It just seemed like whenever we can open this world and give the audience something new, to visually take characters out of their comfort zone, the better. We thought it would be more dramatic and interesting to put Stannis in the position of having to go ask for a loan. It's a humiliating situation. The Stannis storyline is certainly more of a slow burn, but it will pay off, end quote. In the HBO Inside the Episode featurette, Bam Von Wise explained that Tywin's immediate understanding and unhesitating answer of done to Jaime's offer still hint that this is exactly what Tywin was hoping for. If not as soon as Tyrion was arrested, then as a plan he settled on long before the trial began. It's debatable whether Tywin would ever have Tyrion actually killed, if only because it might be seen as embarrassing for Lannister to be executed. But Tywin quickly realized that he could turn the situation to his advantage, using the threat of killing Tyrion to manipulate Jaime to making such a deal. With one stroke, he hated his son Tyrion will be exiled, while Jaime will be forced to accept being his heir. It is stated in this episode that Tywin Lannister is 67 years old, although in the books he is 58 years old at this point in the narrative. Perhaps the reason is that Charles Dance was 67 years old when the episode was broadcast. The scene in which Davos meets up again with Salladhor's son in a communal bathhouse in Braavos was invented for the TV series. However, the TV series did not invent the detail about a Roman-style communal bathhouse. When Jaime and Bran used the baths at Harrenhal, it is noted that they were built up as communal group baths in the style of the free cities. Indeed, the free cities were colonies of the now fallen Valerian freehold, which was their world's fantasy counterpart of the Roman Republic. This is why the baths in her home were small pools which multiple people could use at once. So it's actually entirely consistent with the books that communal bathhouses are fairly common in the free cities. It is clear if Salador is in a brothel or just a public bathhouse, though of course a high-end brothel might contain a bathhouse. The brief subplot of Yara Greyjoy mounting a raid against the Dreadfort to try and rescue Theon, despite the promise given to its setup in the Season 3 finale, quickly fails in this episode. It actually has no equivalent in the books. Theon's sister, named Asha in the books, simply thinks that Theon is dead. Moreover, the Iron Islands are on the exact opposite side of Westeros from the Dreadfort. The Iron Islands are off the west coast of the continent, and the Dreadfort is far to the northeast. There are no canals. Given that George R. R. Martin has said that Westeros is about the size of real of South America, Yara traveling from Pike to the Dreadfort is equivalent to sailing from Ecuador to Venezuela, by traveling south around Cape Horn. Such a journey would take many months. Then again, the TV series has added more time to the narrative, extending it so that one season equals 1 year within the story. 1 month is stated to have passed between the Season 3 finale Season 4 premiere, and this episode is in the later half of Season 4. So the implication might be that Yara managed to make the voyage in about 2 to 3 months. Of course, Ramsay's letter said he would give the Ironborn until the first night of the full moon to withdraw from the north, where he would start sending them more boxes containing pieces of Theon, implying that he gave them a deadline of no more than 1 month. It isn't clear how much time has passed between episodes 1 and 6 of Season 4, but dialogue clearly established that Joffrey's wedding occurred about 1 month after the Red Wedding. It is vaguely possible that because she was in a hurry, Yara could have sailed to Isthmus of the Neck, where the fortress of Mokalan is currently controlled by a force of Ironborn sent there by her father in Season 2, and she and her crew could have crossed overland to reach another Ironborn ship waiting on the eastern coast. But that does not appear to be the TV series' intent. In the books, Ramsay's torture of Theon is so severe that even people who knew him before it physically cannot recognize him. He looks like he has aged 40 years from the stress. His skin is pasty white from not seeing the light of the sun for over a year. He looks like a skeleton when starving in the dungeons, and Ramsay knocked his teeth out. Yara doesn't have trouble recognizing Theon in this episode, though admittedly it would be difficult practical effects to fully portray that. In the circumstances, Yara actually forced a bolted soldier with a blade to his throat to specifically point out which cell Theon was in. In the scene where Ramsay lets Theon have a bath, Brian Coughlin actually wanted the camera to pan down to show the devastated remains of Theon's genitals after Ramsay emasculated him, but Beta von Weiss felt it was unnecessary. Miss Tyrell has been named the new Master of Ships. Stannis was actually the Master of Ships until Robert, but after the war broke out, Cersei simply left the office functionally vacant for a year, until time resumed its office as Hand of the King. Mace's position is in part due to the fact that, with the destruction of the royal fleet at the Battle of Blackwater, the Red Wine fleet is now the only large naval force available to Lannisters, and now its Red Wine are loyal vassals of the Tyrells. In fact, Olenna Tyrell herself was born Olenna Redwine. Oberyn asks what specific office on the small council he will be given, but the matter is unaddressed. Of the several positions on the council, Tywin is Hand of the King, Jaime is Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Varys remains as Master of Whisperers, Pycelle remains as Grand Maester, and now Mace Tyrell is Master of Ships. Of the remaining 2 offices, Tyrion has been stripped of his position as Master of Coin, though no mention is made of who the Master of Laws is. In the books, Tywin actually appointed his younger brother and most trusted lieutenant Kevan Lannister as Master of Laws after they arrived in the city, but the character has not reappeared in Season 3 or Season 4 up to this point. The actor may be unavailable. In the books, Tywin does not bother to give Oberyn a specific office, but has him sit on the council as an advisor without specific duties. Oberyn Martell mentions that he spent 5 years in Essos. In the books, this occurred in Oberyn's youth, after he killed Lord Roynwood in an informal duel. House Roynwood called for Oberyn's blood, so Oberyn was sent abroad to the free cities for several years until tempers at home cooled down. None dared to call his travels exile, which is what it functionally was. At that time, Oberyn served in several sellsword companies, including the Second Sons, which would have seen unsullied soldiers in battle. This is actually only the second episode in which the name of the larger continent Essos has been used on screen. and the first was a brief remark made by Doria in Season 2's The Ghost of Harrenhal, that Karth was the richest city in Essos. Oberyn's dialogue in this episode makes it very clear that Essos is the name of the entire continent. The name has primarily appeared on maps for the TV series, but similar to the books, characters more commonly refer to it as, in the east, across the narrow sea, or to specific sub-regions of Essos, such as in the Free Cities or in Slaver's Bay. Essos is loosely analogous to Eurasia, so saying I'm going to Essos is similar to say I'm going to Eurasia, which could mean anywhere from Italy to China. Therefore, the formula of the entire eastern continent, Essos, tends not to be used frequently in everyday conversation. This episode corrects a small point about Varys. In the Season 3 episode, And Now His Watch is Ended, he explains to Tyrion that as a youth he was a slave who was part of a troupe of actors who traveled around the different free cities, until he was sold to the sorcerer who castrated him in Myr. That episode left out the detail from the books that Varys was actually born as a slave in Lys, and Myr just happened to be the city where his acting troupe was at the time. This episode confirms that Varys is a Lycene, as Oberyn points out that he recognizes hint of an accent. In terms of currency, this is the first episode to introduce the denomination of the gold dragons known as the Silver Stag. When Tywin offers a 100 silver stag bounty on Sandor Clegane. From the books, 1 gold dragon equals 210 silver stags, and 1 silver stag equals 57 copper pennies, which have been mentioned earlier in the TV series. This 1 gold coin equals 11,760 copper pennies. There are a few more other rare denominations. A copper star is worth 8 normal copper pennies, but these are the 3 major common denominations. The round coins which Davos shows to Salador are not Braavosi coins because they have appeared in TV series before and are square-shaped, matching the description from the books. We haven't had a good look at gold dragon coins before, but the coins Davos has doesn't appear to be those either. When Salador holds one up, it can be seen they are stamped with the hourglass-shaped symbol of the Iron Bank, which was seen on the wall of the room where Stannis met the bankers. It's possible they are some sort of unique voucher coin given out by the Iron Bank. Tywin chastises Cersei that dismissing Barristan from the Kingsguard was not only insulting but stupid, as he's now fled to serve a rival claimant to the throne, the last Targaryen heir. Cersei had Barristan dismissed back in Season 1, Episode 8, The Pointy End. In the novels, it is Tyrion who points this out when he first arrives at King's Landing, corresponding to Season 2 premiere. Tyrion explains that Barristan is considered a living legend, and if he joins a rival claimant like Robb or Stannis, it will give a massive boost to their perceived legitimacy. Tyrion only asks if any of this occurred to Cersei at all, to which she can only grudgingly admit that she simply never considered it. One of a string of short-sighted follies in which Cersei never thinks about the long-term impact of her actions. In the small council, Tyrion remarks that the dragons have not won a war in 300 years, since the Targaryen conquest. This is true, but because dragons are an effective deterrent, entire generations passed in which the lords of the Seven Kingdoms were so afraid of the Targaryens' dragons that they dared not rise up and revolt in the first place. As Tywin noted 3 episodes ago, Dorne did manage to resist Targaryen dragons, but the Dornish did this by resorting to guerrilla warfare, harassing Targaryen armies as soon as the dragons left, and Dorne still suffered grievous losses. Dragons also did not prove decisive in the dance of the dragons between Rhaena Targaryen and Aegon II Targaryen, because it was a civil war within the Targaryen family, and both sides had dragons. Ironically, his own ancestor, the army of Loren I Lannister, combined with that of Murray Gardner, outnumbered the army of Aegon Targaryen significantly at the Field of Fire, but was decisively defeated due to Aegon's dragons. A season 4 blooper revealed that during the trial scene, Charles Dance gripped the pommel of one of the swords making up the Iron Throne so hard, because I was angry, that accidentally snapped off. Then when he looked down at it in his grip, embarrassed that he had just broken the Iron Throne prop. Ooh, that's not good. So overall, I think this episode is really darn good, and the trial scene is just, it's just so darn good. I love it. So yeah. I want to represent this dark zone appear in this episode. I think it kind of makes sense, and I think it kind of makes sense considering what's happening in this episode. So, yeah. So overall, I give The Laws of Gods and Men 5 Iron Thrones out of 5. Well, even though I'll be going back to work tomorrow, I'll still make a video after I get done having dinner and everything tomorrow. So, yeah. But anyway, so tune in tomorrow as we take a look at the next episode, Mockingbird. So, until then, remember everyone, winter is coming.